Hi, I'm Tasha DeCruz, nutritional therapist and mindful breastfeeding supporter. Before I had kids, I was an expert on parenting. I knew my kids would be well behaved, confident, and cooperative, and I'd respond calmly and patiently throughout the night and never worry about a lack of sleep. And I would definitely never shout. Fast forward today, and 2 children, mountains of toast and butter, endless ice cream, crackers, and biscuits, and that's just for me. And plenty of shouting later, you'll see the mother I am today. One that finally understands that being healthy is much, much more than cooking organic from scratch every day. One who has learned to occasionally tame the rage and breathe through the tantrums. The kind of mother I'm becoming proud of as I start to learn what's truly important about parenting. I created Raising Healthy Mothers to share what I've learned along the way and the experts who have helped me get here. I hold out a warm hand and offer space for you to have a cup of tea with me and learn alongside me what it truly means to be a healthy mother. So if you're an exhausted mother or one in the making and hoping to become a calmer, more patient, better nourished person without giving up the chocolate, then you're in the right place. Come and join me on my motherhood journey. Today, I am so excited to welcome Elisabeth Beebe to talk about decluttering. We were talking about this, Elizabeth, at the start before I hit record. I said I have never had someone come on to talk about decluttering, and I think it's because I know I have a problem and I don't want to talk about it.
But that's perfect. That's perfect.
Exactly. But I have invited you on because you have just a lovely, gentle, supportive approach, and I do not feel judged or anything when talking about decluttering with you. So that is exactly why I brought you on, because it is time to address the clutter, and I know this is something that everyone's going to really find valuable. So welcome onto the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored that I got to be your first person here to talk about it.
I know. So many episodes later, and yeah, this is the first time I'm talking about it. But let's start off, as I usually do, with just finding out a little bit more about yourself and how you got into decluttering.
Of course. So I am Elizabeth, obviously. I have three daughters right now. They're six, 4, and 2. And when my third daughter was born, I was on bed rest for most of that pregnancy. And at that point, I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So that was a little interesting. And then she was born 6 weeks early. And when she was born, I was like, oh, we're finally home. We're finally healthy. Like, we can do all the things. And we did it. I just kind of like shut down and panicked. And it was it was interesting time. But I kind of felt like I was so overwhelmed with our home. And I didn't really realize it was our home at the point. I was also struggling with postpartum anxiety. I was scared to go out and the girls to get germs and anyone to get sick and all that kind of thing. But anytime that people would invite us out to go someplace, or I would think about going to the park with the girls, I would just sit there and think, well, I can't because I have all this stuff to do at home. Or I'll never catch up. I have to do this whole to-do list. And it would just kind of like freeze me. And so we kind of just didn't do a lot. Like we survived. And anytime that there would be plans that we had to do, I would like panic. I'd be like, how am I gonna be able to figure it all out? And my husband would be like, we should have people over. I'd be like, I do not have time to clean the house for the entire week so we could have people over. And so when my daughter was about 10 months, I think, yeah, 10 months old, I started like scrolling on Instagram one day and I found like the simplified home kind of thing. It's like, wow, this house is beautiful. I would love to have this someday. And, it took a little while, I'm a little slow. And one day I was like, wait a second. She's literally just doesn't have a ton of stuff. Like she doesn't have stuff piled up in the corners or like a ton of decor all over the wall that's like all mismatched and hodgepodge. Or I was like, wait a second, I can get rid of stuff. Like I don't have to go out and buy stuff. I can get rid of stuff. And I started getting rid of things and like decluttering and donating. And as soon as the first few bags went out, it was like, oh my goodness, this feels so good. And this is it. This is what's going to make the difference. And I started decluttering. I had at that time 4-year old, 2-year old, oh, 4-year old, yeah, 2-year old, 10-month old. And didn't have a lot of time, didn't have childcare really most of the time. And so you had to do I had to do what I had to do when I could do it. And so I would just I'm an all or nothing person. So I would want to do it all at once. Just put them away in a room and close the door. And like, but obviously you can't do that. So I would have to pace myself and just kind of focus, one area at a time. But even doing that, because I was determined to get it done, it still got done within 2 months, like pretty much the whole house, not the attic, anything like that at that time. But our whole life changed. Like, it was just absolutely amazing, the difference. And because I had decluttered, I suddenly had more energy, and I no longer wanted to go hide during that time and not do anything because, like, there wasn't anything, like, waiting for me in piles to do, so I didn't feel like I needed to go hide. And so I started, like, doing all these hobbies. I started building, like, benches for our house and doing all these, like, craft things, which I had never ever done before. And, that's what I started sharing on Instagram, and I started realizing that, um, there were other moms out there that needed to hear the same things that I needed to hear, and I needed to realize that they weren't alone. And that's when I started sharing more about my decluttering journey and more how others could do it. And here we are. It's been almost 2 years now, and I absolutely love what I'm able to do and share because it has changed so many other moms. And anytime someone messages me and it's like, "Oh my goodness, I just declared a little space and made such a difference." I'm like, "Yes, I know. I was there." And so it's just a huge blessing to me to be able to do this. And that's where it all came from.
Yeah. Do you know, it's so funny. You just literally have described my home. Piles of stuff everywhere and mismatched in decor. And you have described me, the whole like, oh, we can't invite people over, the house is a mess. And also totally identify with the thing of, hiding away because I can't cope with dealing with it, whatever it is. I mean, as simple as sort of washing the dishes because, it's just a lot. It's a lot on your mind, isn't it?
It's not just washing
Um,
the dishes, it's clearing off all the counters and trying to find the space to wash. Yeah, yeah, I understand.
exactly, exactly. Um, and and also, I really thought that was fascinating what you said about the fact that once you decluttered, you found that you had the headspace to start the hobbies because that I often think like with my clients, they come kind of usually 2 to 3 years postpartum, wherever, whichever child they are at. And they're like, oh, I just feel like, I want to feel like me again. I feel like I could take something up, but I don't have the time, I don't have the headspace and all of that. And I think this is really fascinating because maybe this is the missing point, isn't it? After that many years, you've accumulated all this stuff and you just don't have the headspace for the hobbies. So hopefully we can dive into that a little bit. Um, but why do you think we end up with so much stuff? Like, why is it so difficult to to get rid of stuff?
Well, I think the biggest thing too is we become blind to it, if that makes sense. Like, you just start attracts clutter. So, you know, especially postpartum, you're just setting things aside or you can't really do all the housework right away. So things just kind of pile up and then you just keep adding to those piles. And I think one big thing that I like to look at is like the edges of the house is what I always say. Is I remember I would look around our house and be like, well, everything's picked up, but the house feels so messy. I don't understand. And once I started decluttering and pulling out things that I would just shove to the edges, like, okay, the toys that didn't fit because we had too many toys and they would just go around the edges, or this pile of stuff that I went to bring upstairs and it just kind of like collected right there. And then you don't, after a while, you don't actually see it. You just keep walking up the stairs and you don't think to take it up, but your brain is still subconsciously seeing that. So your brain is like, no, your house is messy. And you're like, no, my house is picked up. It's kind of that little fight of things. And I think as moms, we want our kids to have everything. We want to make sure that our kids aren't deprived. And so for me, I would be more like a hand-me-downs. We didn't have a lot of money to buy all the toys. And people would be like, hey, do you want this toy? Do you want this toy? And I would never say no because of course I have to get this for my child. And then we would just have all these toys and it would become overwhelming for me to like see it and pick them up and my girls because they couldn't even choose which toy to play with because there were so many different toys. It would just become a mess and then they would just walk away because it's hard when there's a lot of options. And I think that we tend to do that with clothing, especially. Our kids are changing sizes every couple months. As soon as you buy a new size, they're going to be the next size, okay? And that's a lot of stress on us because I feel like we always have to go through the clothes. We always have to figure out what's next. And then it just kind of tends to be piled up and there they are wearing something that's two sizes too small, even though they have plenty of clothes that fit them in their drawer, because we haven't had the chance to go through everything. And all that just adds up beyond the fact that we are taking care of kids and making sure that they are fed and alive and happy and trying to catch up with the housework and working. And so it just kind of all adds up into piles. And we get to a point where we're like, well, this is just what it's going to be like because we're moms and this is how it is. And that's the one thing that I want to tell people that's not true. Like realizing that it actually helps us more to declutter. It's not something that moms can't do. It's something that moms all should do, I think, is one of the biggest things that I want to like remind people. And not in a mean way at all. It's just truly it will change your life.
Yeah. And clothes. I mean, again, you just completely totally described my life. Like I have a nearly 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So they don't obviously fit each other's clothes. You know, my youngest doesn't fit
Mhm,
my eldest clothes. So there is that period of time where I have to put them away. And then of course we've got the seasons as well. And I find that it is so
mhm,
overwhelming because there's so many clothes and I've got to go through all of them. And yeah, and I also struggle to say no to clothes from other people because similar, we get a lot of hand-me-downs because we can, and it actually suits our values. I'm not really into
mhm,
kind of buying lots of new
mhm.
stuff, and when we can get hand-me-downs.
And I think that's important to do is we shouldn't say no necessarily as long as we need them, if that makes sense. And that's one thing that we get hand-me-downs, and it's such a huge blessing for my girls, especially because my girls are all stair steps. So once one gets one, then we can just keep going. Of course, they have arguments about that because they want new stuff the end of the row. But anyway, but yeah, it's we can still take hand-me-downs in, but now when I do it, I go through it right away and I instantly think, okay, I don't even like this. I don't or this is worn out, whatever, it's not going to seep into there and add to the piles. Or, hey, we already have three of a very similar thing. And I know this now because I actually know what we have. And then I can just donate those right on without having them be stuck in there. And then to go when it's time to go through the clothes, be like, oh, there's 3 bags. And I don't even know what to do, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So,
and exactly. I mean, if you know what you have, or well, if you know what you have, then you know what you need, what you don't
yeah,
have. And when people say, you know, I've got the clothes, what do you need? You actually have an answer. Because my cousin did that. My cousin did that last time when she came down. She said, "What do you need?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't
clothes.
know." So she just brought a bag of clothes, you know. And most people wouldn't want to do that, like give you a bag of clothes and add to that mental stress.
Yeah,
They want to
yeah,
help you with this.
yes, yes.
Um, so yeah, it's so interesting that you've said that. Wow, yeah, really completely describe describe me. I have piles of clothes waiting to be sorted out.
Well,
So let's talk a bit about the fact that having all this clutter steals time and energy from us.
oh, I mean, what the fact that when I stopped, like when I decluttered our home and realized that suddenly it wasn't just my time and energy, it was like my mental energy, if that makes sense. Like suddenly my brain felt clearer, like it could like focus and think. And I think that the clutter is literally always just, um, I can't remember who said it, but a silent to-do list. So again, like we don't see things, but our brain is seeing things and our brain is registering every time that we see the pile of stuff that sat on the table or the dishes overflowing or those piles of laundry every time that you're walking by and you're like, "Oh, I have to do that. I have to do that." But if our brain is getting those signals every single time we walk anywhere, and even when you're walking past a wall and it has this hodgepodge of decor that you don't even really like anymore, but you haven't even had the time or mental energy to even think about that because it's just there. It's all these little signals to your brain to be like, hey, you have to do all these things. And then you're just tired and you haven't even done anything yet because you're just so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we get to the point where we just sat on the couch and just we don't feel like we're relaxing because in our head we have to do all the things, but we're too overwhelmed to get up and actually do. And that's where people come to me and they're like, I don't have 15 minutes to do something. And I'll be like, actually, I bet you scrolled social media for 15 minutes. And I'm not saying that to rest or relax or whatever, but are you really? Are you just doing it to avoid things? If you really do want the change, it does take work, but it doesn't have to take like all of your time and energy. You can do it in like a small pockets of time. If you just, okay, well, you're cooking dinner and you're like, all right, instead of sitting here on my phone and you're waiting for the thing to heat up on the stove, why don't I just open this drawer up and go through it in 5 minutes? Those little things that you can change as and like make that mindset change will make a big difference eventually in your energy levels and your mental capacity, which is huge, I think, as us as moms, because that's one of the biggest things we struggle with.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, we came into each other's worlds because we were in a course together and we wrote a guide on each of our expertise, and yours is obviously on decluttering. And I've had a look at your guide, and it is so gentle. That's, I said that at the start. Like it makes it feel very doable. But the thing that really struck me early on was you've got the section on your kind of barriers to
The
decluttering.
roadblocks. Yep.
The roadblocks, that's what you call them. And I ticked every single one. It's like, oh my goodness, you speak my
No wonder you haven't
language.
decluttered yet.
um, and it is really interesting because I think a lot of what I know, what we've talked about decluttering already, I knew it is, but I don't think I really realized those roadblocks were the things that were stopping. Because I was like, oh, I don't have time, and then I think you said in the guide as well, you don't have to wait until the kids are all out the house, and that's literally what I'm saying. Every single week, I say to my husband, please, can you just take them out for half a day, and I will you'll come home to this immaculate home, which is ridiculous. I'm not going to get it done in
I
a
mean, that was me too. That was me. I would be like, well, I can't even mop the floor until everyone leaves. It's impossible. Or I can't pick up and clean everything until everyone leaves. And that like never happened. And when I realized that you do it with them, like, or have them there, and it makes a big difference in your mindset change. If you're always waiting for that time's never going to come.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And when I read that guide, I did that. They were in the bath, and I was sitting there thinking, oh, wish I had my Kindle to read while they're in the bath. And I was like, well, no, I should be like cleaning the bathroom or something. I was like, I should be doing something useful with my time. And I was like, hang on, I know what I could be doing. And I did. I decluttered the cabinet above the sink. And do you know what? It's actually still the only thing I've done since reading your guide.
It's a
But
start, though. It's a
it
start.
is, it is. And do you know what? The unexpected benefit has been that every time I open that cabinet, I feel pleasure. And I don't realize how stressful it was. Every time I was opening that cabinet before, I was like, what's going to fall on me today? And it did. It took, 5 minutes probably to get rid of things. And I was ruthless. I'd read these roadblocks and I was
Mhm.
ruthless. I was like, I really don't need this thing. I'm waiting. I had empty boxes of things. I was like, one day I'll fill them up again. I was like,
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't
But you
need
never
this.
do. Yes. And have you missed anything?
No, of course not. And actually, what I ended up doing, I actually threw out a whole load of like empty pots and things, and then I took them back out because I was like, no, because I did it all, and I was like, well, now I need storage, and I was like, I don't need storage. I have all these empty pots. I did. I took them all back out, and now I've repurposed them as storage. And it's not perfect. It's not
No, it doesn't have to
beautiful.
be pretty. I don't think as long as it's useful. And when the cupboards are closed, why does that matter? You know?
Exactly, exactly. And now that they are contained and there are sort of individual things, I can find things easily. And it's not,
Mhm.
things that used to be out on the side, I can put back really easily.
Mhm.
So yeah, it actually has been transformational. And it was like a 5-minute job in one tiny space in the house. And it has helped with the motivation of, I can do this, I can do this
Mhm.
again. Um,
I think that too, that you said something about how every single time that you open it, it brings you joy. And I think often we can become, especially as moms, we're sitting there and we're kind of like bummed. We're like, we need that magic thing. And we go and buy something because we need something else that's going to make our life easier, which was just to end up in the cupboard and not moving. Or you need more storage, like you said. And you're like, well, if I can get new fancy storage, it will make a difference. Whereas if decluttering gives you that same dopamine hit that as buying does, but it's lasting. Like every time you're opening that cupboard, you're like, ah, this is so good. Instead of that one time you buy and then you're done. And so I think we have to remember that too, because one's bringing clutter in and one is bringing clutter out, but you get the same joy from that. So that's just something that I wanted to
yeah,
add in there.
it's a really interesting point, actually. I hadn't thought of it like that. That, yeah, I could have bought something, and as you said, that dopamine hit is a one-off, and but this is like a genuine joy every single
Mhm.
time. And it has made me a lot more aware of all the little hot spots in the house that bring me the opposite, that stress me out, that
Yes.
makes me annoyed. That, I mean, I literally hear myself going, ah! And that's when I know that's the next one to tackle. And I think it's quite interesting as well, because I think often when you hear advice about decluttering, it's often start with the stuff that you can see, so that you can,
Mhm.
that kind of keeps you going. But actually, starting with the bathroom cupboard, which I don't see all the time, but
Mhm.
the fact that every time I do open it up, there is that little spark of joy. That has actually kept that motivation up. And I'm realizing that a lot of the time that my stressful points are those drawers that don't open properly, or the cupboards that have stuff falling out of. And um, yeah, and they do
Yeah, and
take
that's why
time.
people ask me where to start. And And I say, the bathroom and the kitchen because those have easy, smaller zones that you can break up and do that. But in the end, it really needs to be what's bugging you
Yeah.
because that will motivate you to keep going because you'll see the difference in that. If you just clear off one area that doesn't even bug you, then why keep going?
Yeah, yeah, completely. And realizing how much time it's taking up. Every time I'm opening a drawer and everything is like bulging out, I'm having to put them back in once I found the
Or you
thing.
just skip opening it all, like, "I don't even need that thing," and then nothing gets used.
Exactly, exactly. Whereas now, I need a hair tie, I know exactly where to find them instead of having to look for them. But let's talk about the roadblocks because I kind of mentioned them, but and
Mhm.
said that I ticked every single one of them. But how did you come to realize that those were maybe that is the starting point for people to
I
realize?
think that's, they're pretty common ones that people get. Most of the comments that I get, or messages that I'll get will be like, "I can't declutter because my husband isn't on board," which is a real thing. And or I just can't. I have to keep things because I don't have a lot of money, and what if I need to buy it in the future? Um, all of those are just the most common questions of I have kids. I can't declutter. What do I do? And so when you put those all together and you realize that they're universal problems, and but yet some people have decluttered with all of those things. And, like with the spouse, it's such a big one. People be, well, I can't declutter. They're not on board. Necess- yes, that's true. You can't declutter everything because you can't declutter someone else's stuff. That's not right. But you can start with your own stuff. Most of the time, people are saying that, and they haven't actually decluttered their own things. And no one's stopping you from decluttering your own things. And that was for me. My husband wasn't like against it, but he was definitely not on board. Whatever you want to do. But I started decluttering, and he would be home from work and he'd be like, "Wait, the house is picked up and it's clean." Like he wouldn't have to come, after work. We had the three kids. He would come and he'd help me pick up and he'd help me clean up and stuff. And it would be a mess. And it wasn't like that anymore. And he was like, "Wait a second. This is like you already did all of this?" And I would be like, "Yeah." And I would be like, "Let's go do something tonight." Or
Yeah.
would you want to go off on this little adventure? I'm sure I'm game. And he'd be like, "Who are you?" And then, we have people over so often now, which is absolutely crazy to me, and it doesn't stress me out at all. Like, give me, an hour, 2 hours notice, and we can have the house picked up, and I just figured out really, really easy meals, and I'll just be like, "Alright, let's just have people over," and I'm no longer stressed about cleaning my baseboards when people come over, not because my baseboards are clean, but because everything else isn't messy, if that makes sense. So if they wanna judge me on my baseboards, I don't care because they're not gonna open a closet and have everything fall on them. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but, like, for me, it's like I'm not so stressed about having everything perfect anymore because, yes, our house is lived in, and I can't change that, but our house is not cluttered in piles. So they can see that I take care of our house. And okay, there's a handprint on the wall. Well, that probably happened this morning. But even if it didn't and it happened 2 weeks ago, oh well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Meanwhile, the bathrooms are clean because didn't have to pick up everything and I could just wipe things down really quickly. The dishes are done, the laundry's cut up. They're not going to accidentally walk in my room and have 6 loads of laundry sitting on my floor. So I'm not hiding things, if that makes sense. So I don't have to stress about the little things anymore because that's what I would do. I would stress about the little things instead of the big things. And
Yeah.
so I think all those little roadblocks that we struggle with um, quickly dissipate as we declutter, but we let them stop us from decluttering.
Mm.
And especially, think that we have to do it perfectly. And I think that's common for all of us. Well, we can't do it because it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. It's kind of like a learning, you have your decluttering muscle, and the more you declutter, the better it gets because you're more aware of what you need. So I decluttered our whole home, um, but then I've gone through it multiple times, and it doesn't take time at all. I can do it in like 5 minutes. I'll pick a place and I'll just go through something. But each time I go through our home, I declutter more things because I know what we actually use. Now that I know what we have, I say, "Oh, hey, I haven't touched this in 6 months." So it makes things a lot easier to declutter. And so people letting that stop them, thinking that they have to do things perfect, it's not perfect. You just progress. That's what you want to do. And stop letting things that you have to get rid of stop you. You're not sure about getting rid of, stop you. That's one of the big things is, hey, if you don't know and you can't decide, leave it there and move on. Like you're still you want your house to become manageable. It's not about making it perfect. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people have to realize.
Mm. Yeah, and I think the thing that really stuck out there actually is realizing that it's ongoing, and I suppose that's where the perfection comes in. It's like, well, I've done it once, it'll be done. And you've just said that it's ongoing for you, like you're
Well, and
still decluttering.
things don't you don't stop bringing things in. You're more mindful. I'm no longer scrolling on Amazon just ordering random things because instead I'm like, I'm going to declutter that, or I'll think, well, that'll be really cool. And I'm like, no, that will be in my drawer because I won't want to have to clean that and use that little fancy cooking tool when I can use my knife just fine. Your mindset changes for those kind of things, but you still have clothes coming in because your sizes change. You still have all of those little things. And so you just kind of decluttering maintenance, but it becomes more of like a habit and not like a big, huge task. And so you don't panic about it anymore. It's almost fun. Like we just did that. We're doing a 5 day challenge right now, on my Instagram. And it's so much fun because I designed it for myself because I'm like, all right, it's December and I'm struggling with my house feels a little bit messy. So I'm going to go through like these 5 areas, and it made a huge difference. Like, literally, I went from like, "Ugh, I have so much to do," to, "Oh, I got this," just
Yeah.
from decluttering these areas. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And realizing that what you're struggling with is probably what a lot of people are going to be struggling with, even though you have
Yeah.
this so-called decluttered home.
Yeah, for sure.
So we talked a bit at the start about one of the issues I think people have is like, well, if I'm decluttering, then I have to be really minimalist. And can you talk a little bit about the difference between the two? Like, why do they not necessarily have to be one equals the other?
So I think a lot of people get confused too with like minimalist decor versus minimal, and for myself, I've learned that I prefer less decor. So I'm more of a minimalist in my decor. So people see pictures of my house and they say, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't do all." And I'm like, you don't have to have minimal decor like I have. It has nothing to do with decluttering. It has to do with only keeping the things that you love and use. And so a lot of people will be like, "Well, I can't get rid of my mugs. You put declutter mugs." I didn't say declutter all of your mugs. And I just actually recently had someone in the challenge that I did. She collects mugs. And so she went through her mugs, and instead of saying, "Oh, I can't declutter my mugs," and she's like, "I got rid of a few that I didn't like. But when I decluttered the area where I keep them, I was able to display all of them that I love." She goes, "So now I have all the mugs that I love displayed so that I can enjoy them instead of hiding in cupboards because I decluttered." And I think that's so important because we're not decluttering to get rid of all of our stuff. We're decluttering the unnecessary and the things that are pulling us back so that we can actually love and enjoy the things that we do use and have. And so I think, I have friends that have decluttered and some of them like, "Oh, put them decor," some like a little bit of decor, and it doesn't really have it it doesn't make a difference. As long as you are only keeping the things that you use and you love, and everything that you look at, you're like, and I think as you declutter, you'll realize that you actually love a lot less than you think you do, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Because you're like, oh, you go through right now your house and you're like, oh, I have to keep all of this stuff. Well, you're keeping it when you realize that every single item you own is something that's taking up your time, your energy, and your space. You kind of make things, you're like, you kind of wait a little bit more. You're like, well, this item has been sitting in this corner for over a year. We probably don't need this item, and you look at things with little bit different eyes. And but you definitely do not have to get rid of anything. In fact, that's the opposite of decluttering. I think it's more of allowing those things to shine through. And I think that's very important to remember.
Yeah. And actually, what I think has struck me there is because I always say, oh, I don't really feel like I have a personal style. Like, I wouldn't really know what to do, like with my decor around with our house and stuff. And we rent as well. So it's very minimal that we can actually do other than, just kind of temporary things. But it's kind of struck me that maybe half the issue is I don't know what my style is because I haven't spent the time looking at all of my mugs, for example, and going, well, which are the ones I actually enjoy getting out when I have guests or using for myself, and which are the ones that I'm constantly shoving to the back
I
and would
absolutely
rather
love
just get
that
rid of.
because that was me. That was me. I had no personal style. I just assumed that people in all these nice houses had them because they had a lot of money and they could do all these things. And when I first decluttered, I was ruthless and I took down all of our decor, like all of it. And I had a hodgepodge of, oh, wedding gifts or people being like, "I don't want this anymore." So you take it, and I'd be like, "Sure," because then I won't have to buy something. And once I started looking at it with, do I actually like it? my personal style started to emerge. I had no idea what my style. I had a bunch of like farmhouse decor and all these weird decor, like all throughout my house. And it was like this hodgepodge. And when I took everything down and only started putting things up that I really liked, first of all, I put up way less. And I learned that just a few simple things can make our house. And that's when I realized I had like a minimalist, modern kind of look. But I remember a friend coming over and being like, I knew those curtains you had up you hated. And I was like, I didn't know that. They were just really cheap curtains from the store. And I was like, oh, they'll go with my house. They didn't go with my house. And but when I had when I decluttered, I was able to be more intentional and actually pay attention and be like, when you start, I started from scratch in a way. I only put up, and I didn't go out and buy a bunch of things. Instead, I stopped buying completely and I only put up what I absolutely loved that I had. And it turned out they were all the similar things.
Yeah.
And then I just waited and slowly over the next year or two, if I found something on a good deal or whatever, or even if it wasn't a good deal, because I wasn't buying a bunch of stuff, I was able to spend the money that otherwise I would have wasted on random things. So I tend to be the person where I'm like, okay, well, there's these two colors. I really like this color better, but this one's so much cheaper. So I'm going to have to buy this one.
Yeah.
And because in my brain, I can't, and then I always regret it. And so one of the things that I did is I bought end tables for our bedroom. And we had our end tables that we had were from my parents' attic that were like this poster board. I don't know, not the poster board, but this weird, and they were warped. And I had taken wall paint and painted it over them. And they worked. They worked. I hated them, but they worked. And I had found these end tables that I absolutely loved, and they were expensive. I was like, I can't spend that on end tables. And I waited, I think it was almost 8 months, and I would just kept looking for like a knockoff version of them, like
Right.
over and over. And I was like, finally one day, I was like, wait a second, it's been this long. I still really like these end tables. I don't can't find anything else. What if I just saved up and bought these end tables? And I did, and every time that I walk into our bedroom, I'm like, "I love her end table." And I was like, "Wait, it wasn't a waste of money. It was something that I absolutely love, but because I wasn't going out and buying all the cheap end tables to replace those multiple times, I actually was able to save up the money for something that I absolutely truly love." And I think that's the one thing about decluttering is we're not depriving ourselves. We're actually being intentional about not only our homes and what we put in them, but also our money. And when we're more intentional and we actually buy things that we love that last longer, in the long run, we win, you know?
Yeah. It's so, yeah, wow, this is just it's so interesting because I'm the same. Like a lot of our furniture is hand-me-downs again,
Mhm.
what,
Yep.
what we've kind of got from other people. And you know, they annoy me every time. Like I can't open a drawer without it annoying me or it falling apart or whatever. And I really love the idea that if I did make a start on decluttering in a year's time, I might say to myself, do you know what? I think you're worth paying
Mhm.
for a good, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
brand new. It could still be secondhand, but
Yeah.
something that I actually genuinely
And
like.
and we instead of, like, rushing, if we wait to find what we actually like, I think that's the biggest thing is in this day and age, we're kind of a rush, and we have to buy things, we have to do it, and who cares what other people think about our house? As long as we are loving our homes, that's what matters, and I think that's big, especially with social media. We're always like, you have to go buy the next viral thing, or, the longest time, I thought I needed one of those black arch mirrors, and I was like, "Okay, they're gorgeous, and I need one of those for our bedroom." Well, meanwhile, I have a thrifted one that I got for $10 before we got married, and it's like this really nice wood frame, and it's like the perfect color wood that I absolutely love. And after like months of trying to find a good deal on one of those black arch mirrors, all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, I love the mirror that we have in our bedroom, and it's unique, and no one else has it. Why am I trying to look like everyone else?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, duh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So interesting. And back to that point about the fact that you realize your own style when you have the headspace to kind of look at what you
Yes,
love.
yes,
So
yeah.
interesting. What would you say if you feel like your partner has a completely different style or thinks that he has a different style?
Oh goodness, I don't know because I'm really lucky that mine really likes whatever I do right now. I'm always like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "No, it's really like that." So, I think that again, it's kind of a compromise. You have to look at things as it's not just your space. And just like when it comes to decluttering, you have to kind of step back, do what you can, and then kind of, mix and match things. I think it's really cool because I think a lot of styles, and like decor and stuff like that, they can be mixed and matched if you do it the right way. And so when you pull back and you declutter, you both might be surprised that you both like things that are completely different. But again, you can't do it all on your own. I think it would just be more of a just get their opinion, include them, obviously, and also kind of not try to rush things. When you push someone to change or do something the way that you want, it's the quickest way to make them be like, nope, I'm out. And I think that being patient, again, like everything with decluttering, it was like decor and all that kind of stuff, being intentional and just slowing down and being patient instead of, I tend to be one of those, I get an idea in my head and we're going to go do it right now. You want to build a window seat? All right, let's go to Lowe's and let's get all the, and wait, you can't just do that, okay? Like, and so I'm learning to just slow down. And oftentimes when I do that, and I change my mind.
Mm.
So I will be like, oh, wait, that wasn't realistic, or things like that. And so I think, again, when it comes to your partner and stuff like that, we have to just slow down and learn together and find ways to compromise and talk about it. A lot of people will be like, well, I can't declutter because so and so. Have you actually ever told them how the clutter makes you feel? Because I think that's a big thing. And I know that doesn't work for everyone, but that is a big thing, is just, hey, this is what's bugging me. This is what bothering me. I think this will help. Can we talk about it and figure out a solution together? And I think that's one of the most important things, instead of just automatically being like, well, can't do it because they won't.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah.
yeah, and also realizing that it's probably going to benefit them as well. I mean, my husband, for example, is always losing his keys, and I don't, because I have a place for them. And I'm like, why don't you just put your keys in a place? But actually, perhaps if we did have a lot less clutter, he would find his place, or he
And I
would work it
found
out.
Well, and also I found too, when there are places and I'm not overwhelmed, it's easy for me to find their things
Yeah.
and be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna put it right there." And people all the time, I'll be like, "How do you get them to put their stuff where they go?" Well, sometimes they don't, but it's not a big deal for me anymore to just be like, "Oh, here it is."
Yeah.
And then when they say, "Where's my keys?" I'll just say, "In the place they go." And eventually it clicks like, "Hey, if I always put this in this spot, I'm gonna always find it there."
Mm.
And that happened with my husband with his wallet, like, so many times. He'd be like, "I can't find my wallet, can't find my wallet." And I was like, so I finally started putting it in one spot every time that I would find it randomly. And I'd be like, "Oh, here it is." 'Cause that's not where it goes. I'm like, "Do you have a spot where it goes?" And he would be like, "Well, no." And then finally one day he's like, "Hey, if I always put my wallet in this spot, I always find it." And I was like, "Yeah." And he was just kinda joking, like, "Oh, wait, you were right. This actually makes
Yeah.
sense." And I think just things like that, like having a spot for the toothbrush and the toothpaste, maybe it doesn't always go back, but for us, it's not a big deal to put it there anymore because we're not overwhelmed by everything else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then eventually it will catch on.
Yeah, yeah, and stop feeling resentful that, oh, you're
Yes.
having to pick up after them again and
Yes,
again and
yeah,
again.
and when it's their one toothbrush, but we have all these other piles, it does feel like a lot,
Yeah.
or the laundry piles, it's not that big of a deal anymore,
Yeah,
so
yeah, because it feels petty otherwise to be like, well, I'm not going
yeah,
to pick up your keys and put them in the right place because you should take responsibility. And that does
yeah,
feel petty because you're
exactly.
like, well, we're partners here.
Yep,
Uh,
yep.
yeah, I love that. I think, and I can see how the sort of effects then of decluttering just goes way beyond just the fact that you're getting stuff out of your house.
Oh, everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. So what would be your top tips then for getting started and making it not overwhelming?
So my top tips would be, one is, find a donation box and have that easily accessible. Keep it, because this way, if you're going around your house and you are, doing the dishes and you find a mug that you know that you hate, you can be like, "Hey, I want to stick that in a donation box," instead of, or you find a shirt that's too small and you don't even like, you can be like, "I'm going to throw that in a donation box," instead of being like, "I think I'll declutter this sometime," but you just put it back in the closet because you don't have a spot for it. If you have a dedicated spot, that's really huge. Another thing is, find, like we talked about before, find a spot that is bugging you, and don't think about things as a whole. Like, don't think about your home as one huge project or it will become overwhelming. But find a spot, and if it's a bigger spot, kind of like zone it down in your head and just set a timer, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and just go through that spot, that one spot. And you don't, if the timer goes off, you can just walk away. You don't have to like finish it that time. Take care of, I always think things to four piles personally. It's trash, donate pile, the keep pile that you're going to put back in that area, and then relocate. Because I think we as moms, we tend to, if we go into another room to put things where it belongs, we're going to get distracted. If we have a relocate pile, we don't leave that spot until we're done, and then we move the relocate pile. And it kind of helps keep us from getting too distracted too quickly. So I would just pick a spot, also keep a donation bin, and also remember you don't even have to set the timer and do a spot if you are not ready for that. If you just declutter, say 3 things a day, how hard is that to walk around your house, be like, "I'm gonna find 3 things today," put that in the donation box or the trash, whatever. It will add up, and you'll start to realize, and I think often when we're looking for those things, we will do more because 3 things feels manageable. So don't try to convince yourself that you have to do everything at once or whatever. Just do what you can when you can, and just realize that it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to feel scary.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Let's talk as well about the guide that I've mentioned a couple of times that I feel like has really moved the needle for me when it comes to the idea of decluttering. So, how did you come to write the guide, and what's in it that you think is going to help people?
So I had been wanting to write this for a long time. And then, like you said, we had taken that class together. And I took that class specifically because I knew that it would force me to finally put this together because I had this in my head. But I think I had a previous guide before that would teach people how to declutter, which was great. But a lot of people tend to want specific step by steps for everything. And that breaks it down. And it's one less, you're decluttering because you're overwhelmed. So to have to put together a decluttering plan or take, the steps and put them into practice can still feel overwhelming. Whereas if you have every single step broken down for you, it takes that overwhelm and that away. So I wanted to break down people's entire homes, which I know everyone's home is different, but I did my best to kind of give a broad, but break down every single room in people's homes and then divide those homes by zones. And that way, you don't have to start in one spot and follow a plan that might not work for you. You can just pull up that guide and be like, all right, I can't stand how my bathroom feels like it's like struggling. You can just click on it and go through there, and it will take you through steps with notes for me because I feel like I've done this before, and there's, like, always these little tidbits that you wanna throw in, like, I'm having a conversation with you, and I wanna be like, "Hey, you're doing this area, well, remember this." So that was, like, I'm just really excited about that because it was one thing that had been in my head for a long time, and I'm just really excited that it's out and available to people and how much people love it. Like you said,
Yeah.
it makes things doable, and that's what I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to make things feel more overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what's interesting what you said about the tidbits and the kind of like having a conversation. Like I've not gone through the whole guide like, page by page and actually doing it, but I have skimmed through it and read it through. And there are so many things that I've picked up that I'm like, oh yeah, that's so helpful. And it's on my mind. Like when I get around to that bit, I'll have that in mind.
Yeah.
So it's great. So tell people how they can get hold of that guide and where they can find it.
So, you can find me on Instagram at Balancing Beams and Facebook and pretty much just at Balancing Beams anywhere. And then in my bio, there'll be a link for the guide. And I also have like a free checklist and like a quick start guide for anyone that's not quite ready to purchase the other guide. And I also run a quarterly challenge. It's like a 15-day challenge. So it takes a similar style as my guide. But instead of a guide, it's 15 days of email set right to your email. And we kind of walk through just not the whole house. We just walk through those hot spots in your home that are high traffic areas to kind of clear it. And this is especially great for people that struggle starting on their own and they need the accountability. And so we'll go through and just kind of give you one 15-minute task every day in your email, and then we have like a community in Slack where we kind of encourage each other and share before and afters. And it's so much fun when we do it. And so I run that quarterly. And the next one will be on January 6th.
Yeah, amazing. And I'll put links to all of those things in the show notes so people can find you and they can get the guide and they can join the challenge. I think I'll be joining the challenge because it sounds like a great way to start the year or to start
It
each
gives you that push.
season.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds great. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and giving us some really easy ways to get started with decluttering. And honestly, my biggest takeaway is the fact that it's so much more than just getting rid of the stuff, the headspace, the time, the energy, and even just helping with relationships. I feel like it's like a real all-round self-help
It's
strategy.
really
And
truly
it's
life changing.
yeah, and it's free. Like, you don't have to
Hmm.
go out and kind of spend loads of money on it. You just get on with it and do it. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you found today's episode helpful, then please leave a review and rating and share it with anyone else who could benefit. And if you're a busy mum tired of cooking the same meals every week, then you need my free template meal plans guide. Say goodbye to your cooking rut and hello to effortless meal planning. To download the guide, head to tashadecruz.com/template.